Hello, and thank you for joining me in the first of our multi-part series on the work-study programs at UNC. Today we're going to be talking about the process overview and the regulations attached to the program. We'll start by taking a look at an overview of the process, and what it takes to become a work-study supervisor, and some important dates that you'll need to know. In order to become a registered work-study supervisor, which is someone who can be a part of the program and supervise students, the process starts by reviewing the program and deciding if it is a good fit for you. Part of that is ensuring that the position you have in mind and have conceptualized will fall within the federal regulations discussed a little later in this program. Then, if you decide that the program is something that you would like to pursue, you'll need to complete 2 training modules, both housed in Sakai, one on the regulatory and logistical aspects of the program and another on the JobX system, which is the electronic job board we use to post, allow students to apply to, review, and hire students through. Once you've completed both of those trainings, there is a mandatory quiz that you'll need to pass with a 100% score to prove that you have retained the knowledge covered in the trainings. If you're a new supervisor, you'll also need to complete a WS Supervisor registration form online. Once all of these items have been completed, you'll then gain access to the JobX system. If you'd like to get started with this process, you can visit our website by Googling UNC Work Study and clicking on the Prospective Supervisor link on the right side of the page. Once you become a registered work-study supervisor, you'll be able to start on the job creation process outlined here. The process begins normally in late May or early June. This year, the 18-19 year, begins on June 8th and will run through June 30th, during which time we invite all work-study supervisors to create their positions. We do allow positions to be created after the June 30th priority date through August 20th, 2018 this year, but we do not guarantee that any position created on July 1st or later will be in the system by the time that students gain access on August 1st. Once you've created the position will flow to the work-study team for review and posting. You'll receive an email confirmation once this process has been completed. We do invite you at this time to review the posting for any updates, necessary changes, or additions. Then, beginning on August 1st, all undergraduate students who qualify for the work-study programs will gain access to our system. We do ask that you wait until August 2nd to begin reviewing, interviewing, and hiring these students, but you're free to do so beginning on August 2nd and going through the end of the academic year. Once you've selected a student, they will need to complete hiring and onboarding processes. These will be covered in more detail in a later training, but break down into 2 components. The first, the hiring process with the Human Resources Department or your Shared Services Center, needs to be done to complete federal regulated employment verification, as well as federal withholding, state withholding, and direct deposit enrollment. The second half, onboarding, deals with introducing the student to your position and the specific duties and requirements contained. Then, beginning on the very first day of classes for the fall term, which falls on August 21st for the 2018 fall semester, students can begin working at their position provided the hiring and onboarding steps have been completed. Students are allowed to work 24 hours a day, every day, from August 21st until December 14th, which is the last day of the fall term. For those students who are employed in a fall and spring position, meaning it runs throughout the academic year, and who will be taking classes at UNC in both the fall and spring semester, students can work over the winter break. They are not required to stop on December 14th, the last day of finals. However, any student enrolled in a fall-only position or enrolled only for the fall term must stop work at this date. Students who come back for the spring term can begin work on January 9th. Or students who have been hired to a spring-only job are free to begin work on this date as well. A similar situation applies here, where students can work from the first day of classes, January 9th, through the last day of finals, May 7th, during the 2018-19 spring 19 semester. However, any student enrolled in the federal work-study program must cease work no later than May 7th. Students who are enrolled in the Carolina Works program, which is separate from the federal work-study program, may continue to utilize their work-study funding throughout the summer, provided they are enrolled for the summer 2019 term. All employment must finish by August 16th, 2019 under the Carolina Works program. And now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the rules and regulations surrounding the Federal Work Study and Carolina Works programs here at UNC. On this page you can see the index of the federal rules and regulations as outlined in the Federal Student Aid Handbook. On the right you can see an excerpt from the institutional regulations. As you might imagine, there are a lot of regulations and they go fairly in-depth about how to run the program. Rather than asking all supervisors to review all of these regulations, we instead provide abbreviated topics and trainings only on those items that supervisors need to be aware of and keep their operations in line with. You can find tools covering this information in the regulatory training, part of the mandatory Sakai training, the 1819 Annual Update Guide covering the program regulations and updates that have been changed over the past year, and the Work Study Rules and Regulations Guide containing the most often referenced and most frequently asked questions about rules and regulations on these topics. I'd like to spend just a moment talking about why these federal regulations are so important, and especially why staying in compliance with them is necessary to the continued operation of the work study programs at UNC. Each regulatory violation of a federal regulation can cost up to $25,000 in fine, plus the cost of fixing the error. For example, during the 17-18 academic year, we only had 199 overearnings, most of which have already been resolved before the end of the year when this presentation is recorded. All in all, that's about 8% of the students who participated in this program have a regulatory violation of this nature. For most people, 92% success would be a wonderful thing. However, when we employ the federal fine formula, those 199 overearns at $25,000 per finding would cost the program nearly $5 million. The federal program at UNC for work study is not a $5 million program. Hence, this small 8% error could actually bankrupt the program. In order to prevent that, we are very proactive about training and enforcing our regulations. We also spend a lot of time working on the back end after violations do occur to resolve them and prevent them in the future, because it's much easier and much less costly to prevent these issues and resolve them than it is to have them come up in audit findings. For example, the over-earnings during the 17-18 year that we're speaking of would only cost $83,000 to resolve, compared to the nearly $5 million fine that might result if these issues were not resolved. The following two slides contain information on the most pertinent and important regulations that students and supervisors need to know in order to remain in compliance with the program. Let's go through them. Students must show and maintain need to receive work study funding. In other words, funding has to be based on the student's financial need. Students who do not display this financial need on federally required documents cannot participate in the program, and allowing them to do so is in direct violation of federal regulations. Students must also be hired into JobX. It is not sufficient to simply hire them in Connect Carolina, but they must be hired in JobX, which is the official system of record. Students not hired through JobX will be out of compliance. Students must also complete HR onboarding and submit proof that they completed the HR training before they can ever begin work. HR onboarding, as previously discussed, consists of I-9 verification, W-4 and NC-4 filings, and direct deposit enrollment. Proof of the work study training involves the student providing the supervisor with a screenshot or printed copy of their work study quiz showing the student received a 100% evaluation. Students are only allowed to work during academic terms, excluding holidays. We've briefly mentioned this before, but students who are employed for fall and spring in the same job, and who will be attending UNC in the fall and spring, are allowed to work over the winter break. Carolina Works students who are on an institutional work program and therefore not subject to federal regulations on the topic are allowed to work holidays. These do include university holidays. However, a supervisor must be on hand if a student is working over a university holiday, and the department must be open. While at their jobs, students cannot undertake a number of activities, including studying and completing academic work, operating motor vehicles, or working remotely or virtually. Students have to check in physically with a registered work-study supervisor at the beginning and end of each shift. Again, Carolina Works students are not subject to all of these regulations and are allowed to operate motor vehicles and work remotely or virtually. Those supervisors are responsible for ensuring that the students are working during the times logged on their timesheets. Students need to document their attendance via sign-out form. For most supervisors, this is as simple as having the student sign in to TIM and sign out of TIM at the beginning and end of each shift. Students are not allowed to exceed 20 hours per week or 40 hours per pay period. This means students who work less than 20 hours in one week cannot work more than 20 in the next pay period and are never allowed to work more than 20 in any individual week. And most importantly, students may not earn more than their work-study award. Doing so puts the student into an over-earned status, which, as we mentioned on the previous slide, causes a number of issues in terms of federal regulations and can be a $25,000 fine to the university if found on an audit. Please, please, please do what you can to keep students from over-earning their work-study awards. Remember, students can be switched to departmental or other funding sources at any point in order to prevent this issue. Supervisors must be available whenever a student is working. Supervisors don't need to be physically present with the student at any time they're performing their duties, but must be available via some method if the student has a question, concern, or needs to contact the supervisor at any point while the student is working. Supervisors, however, must be physically present at the beginning and end of each student's shift to check the student in and out of work as per federal regulations on the topic. Please note that both primary and secondary supervisors can undertake this task, so we do recommend having primary and secondary supervisors on every posting to allow greater flexibility. Additionally, as this is a federal regulation, we do allow Carolina Works students to work virtually or work remotely, negating the need for the physical check-in and check-out. Primary supervisors must be permanent, full-time faculty or staff, either employed by the university or one of our community service partners who have been previously approved. Secondary supervisors also need to complete these requirements, and all primary and secondary supervisors must complete work-study supervisor training annually. Supervisors are responsible for ensuring that the student meets the responsibilities of the position and are paid accordingly. Any payroll issues or problems where the student derivates from their normal discussed responsibilities are the area of the supervisor to resolve. Supervisors are responsible for ensuring students do not violate program regulations. This is the primary function of a supervisor other than monitoring work and performance. These regulations, which we've already discussed in part, include completing all required onboarding processes prior to the beginning of work, tracking and submitting the hours accurately that the student has worked, ensuring the student works only during eligible periods, making sure the student doesn't exceed the previously mentioned weekly time limits, and, again, most importantly, ensuring the student does not over-earn their annual work-study award. As previously mentioned, failure to comply with federal regulations and rules of the program can result in hefty financial and logistical penalties. In order to ensure that the work-study program at UNC continues to receive federal funding, the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid's work-study team monitors and attempts to enforce all regulations. We do ask for supervisors' help in making sure that these regulations are met. In cases where supervisors either fail to meet regulations on a regular basis and/or fail to resolve issues once noted, we do reserve the right to remove supervisors from the program. This is not meant to be a punitive action, but is done in order to ensure that other participants in the program who are meeting the regulations will not have their funding adversely affected. Most notably, departments who hire students without authorization through JobX or fail to complete JobX registration will have their earnings retroactively charged to the department in order to resolve the federal regulation issue. And any department who allows their student to exceed the work-study award will be charged for all earnings in excess of the student's work-study allotment. Thank you for staying with us and viewing this presentation. If you'd like to see the rest of our work-study primer series, please navigate to our webpage, which you can find the URL at here, or simply Google UNC Work-Study and click on the supervisor link in the middle of the page. If you have questions or would like to reach out to our work-study team, please email work-study@unc.edu. Thank you.